Bowl always comes down to months, weeks, days, hours, and seconds of painstaking study, preparation, and coaching. But all of that can be ruined by one single slip-up, one little adjustment not made, one call that ruined the Eagles' entire season. Super Bowl 57 was all about offense and all about scoring. 38-35 meant there was little to no margin of error, and in the end, the Chiefs ultimately exploited the Eagles' defense to win the game and alter legacies. The play they call corn dog actually popped up all the way back from earlier in the season, and how to defeat it can be uncovered in the annals of history. Before we dive into how the play works, why the Eagles failed to defend it, and how they could have, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. They are a fantasy sports app that is the best I've ever used. All season long, I've been playing their pick'em games where you select 2 to 5 players and bet their over-under stats for that game. If you can pick 5 and win, that's 20 times your entry fee, just like that. You can choose any game as long as it's on the slate. They have basketball, NHL, college basketball, soccer, tennis, PGA, MMA, you name it. It sucks that football's over, but the sports world and Underdog never stop. I'm throwing down a couple bucks on some of the NBA's best balling out tonight, and by putting 20 on it while picking 5 players, if I win, that is $400. Choose 2 to 5 players, choose any over-under you want. It's a ton of fun. Use my promo code Rollins to get a match deposit of up to $100. So if you put in 100, it instantly turns into 200. That's promo code Rollins. Let's first start off by breaking down the actual play, then we'll go all the way back through the season and through the game to see how they set it up. The Eagles are in man coverage and are worried about Kadarius Toney taking a jet sweep, which is a quick handoff as he crosses, or even getting a quick pass once he's across the formation. So instead of asking Avonte Maddox or Darius Slay to run with him all the way across the formation, they use a rock and roll check, which has their safety switch onto him to cut off the leverage. But the Chiefs are ready for this motion and they wheel Toney back out. This was carefully set up throughout the game, but also throughout the season. When Andy Reid went back to study coaches similar to him to see how they attacked the Eagles defense, he knew Doug Peterson, his old assistant, might have some good answers. Here is a similar alignment with the 2 receivers up top, and the Eagles once again in man. They are terrified that Jamal Agnew is going to take the quick motion across the field, so they once again rock and roll to swap the safety and cornerback. The reason Andy Reid copied this play isn't so much the call that the Eagles made, but the way they installed it. Instead of CJ Gardner-Johnson confirming that Agnew was motioning across the field, look at his eyes. This split second right here is all Andy needed to see to install Corn Dog because he knew he could exploit him. However, because it's so risky to rely on this one split second, which popped up on tape months and months ago, he had to make absolute sure that the Eagles would react the same way to the same motion. On one of the first plays of the game, you can see why they installed the check in the first place. Sky Moore, who would later also score in Corn Dog, jet motions across. The Eagles don't match it, and Avonte Maddox has to try and navigate through all this trash to make sure he can beat Moore to the sideline. It's nearly impossible. In fact, the Chiefs hit the Cardinals with the exact same concept in the low red zone back in week 1, so we can see why Jonathan Gannon wanted to install this rock and roll check. Defenses know they can't out-leverage the quick route one-on-one, so they need other answers. One of those is to just play zone instead of man, where the corners don't have to follow the receiver across the formation. When Toney motions across, since they're in zone, Darius Slay doesn't follow him, and the linebackers just bump over to account for the jet sweep, if it comes. To get the Eagles out of zone coverage, which is their bread and butter, the Chiefs use zone beaters like this one to force them into man. They hit him with these zone beaters early and often because they knew that's what the Eagles love to play, so Andy Reid diced them up to force them out of zone to get them to play man to later exploit them. This is just the second play of the game with the Eagles hitting in a too-high zone. One of the best ways to beat zone is crossing routes, which is where Travis Kelce dominates, and the Chiefs noticed on tape that the Eagles defend play-action crossers out of too-high safeties a very specific way, which is what we talked about last week on the show. When they're in too high, they'll have the opposite safety take the crosser so both safeties can play with leverage. Reid is always sure to confirm and set up what he's about to do, so again when the opposite side safety comes to cut Kelce's crosser and the other safety rotates over the top for what's usually a post, now when Reid goes back to his call sheet, he knows he can really rip him to get him out of zone. Back to our previous jet motion play with the Eagles still in zone, now Reid has Kelce fake the crosser over the middle, so it messes with their rules and the opposite side safety strategy is completely fooled. Good offenses can hone in on the defense's rules and exploit them, and I'll just add one more element on this play that we'll see pop up again. With Tony's motion towards him, Jerick McKinnon also comes across the formation to kick out the pass rusher in protection, so remember that. And now with this Kelce completion, the Chiefs have forced the Eagles to mostly abandon zone for the rest of the game. On the day, they played man 55% of the time, the most they have all year, and that little McKinnon maneuver helps them set up a touchdown. The Chiefs are excellent at using parts of the play that don't really impact the current play to set up stuff for later. Now that the defense is almost exclusively playing man, they motion Sky Moore to see if they'll trigger rock and roll, and they do. Remember how the jet motion moved towards McKinnon, who kicked out the pass rusher in protection? Well, now the Chiefs run a man beater with him called T-Sleeper. In man coverage, it's nearly impossible for the linebacker to chase McKinnon through all the commotion, and he just barely gets tackled at the 1. This sets up the Isaiah Pacheco plunge into the end zone to put them closer 24-21. But what's really important here is once again Andy Reid double and triple checking what he's about to do will work. Watch their defense when Sky Moore goes in jet motion. Nobody knows what to do. They make the same check, but it involves like 4 guys instead of just 2. Moore comes back, 3 guys move all around, and oh yeah, Pacheco walks in the touchdown. Finally, the next drive is when everything pays off. The play before the very first play we watched, Reid checks again where Moore motions, the Eagles switch. Now, instead of McKinnon kicking at the end or running T-Sleeper, he takes the handoff, and finally, the Chiefs are in business inside the 5. With Tony now the motion man, both Maddox and Slay shift towards the safety. This is really on Slay, he should have stayed home on Kelce. But regardless, this is a walk-in touchdown, and Kansas City takes the lead on Corn Dog. One drive later, before the second Corn Dog, Reid wants to quadruply make sure the Eagles are still rock and rollin' and haven't adjusted, so he uses more in the jet sweep. The Eagles do the same exact frickin' thing, and he knows he's got Corn Dog times 2. But now the Eagles actually have adjusted. They are running cover 0, which is an all-out blitz with no deep safeties, so nobody for Maddox to pass Moore off to. Bradbury slides to MVS, Maddox is ready to take Moore across, and is in position in straight man to guard against Corn Dog, but his eyes are maybe on Rihanna's dancer dudes, I don't know, and Moore comes wide the hell open. Football, especially in the NFL, truly is chess, and the grand wizards like Andy Reid go back in time to see how similar concepts and coverages have played out before. I decided to go back in time myself to 2020 since I was curious how this Corn Dog can be stopped. In the NFC divisional round, the Rams' answer to just straight jet motion was to cover Devontae Adams with Jalen Ramsey one-on-one. And once again, we see the stress that puts on Ramsey since he has to bob and weave his way through all the traffic. The next week in the NFC Championship, one the Packers lost by 5, mind you. The Packers know the Bucs have studied what they did 1,000 times over and over and over, so they first have to test the waters. Their adjustment was also to rock and roll the safety and corners responsibilities just like the Eagles do. They actually do it a tiny bit different here where they switch one of their man corners onto Adams just to give themselves a little more leverage. And the Packers hand the ball off, but yeah, they're just making sure. The next play they have a trick up their sleeves where they're going to run basically one-man corn dog. Knowing the Bucs will switch, they jet motion Adams across, the corner and safety communicate the switch, but here's the difference. Carlton Davis confirms with his eyes that Adams is motioning across, and when he sees him come back, the play is completely dead. When we look at where the Eagles went wrong, they didn't have their corners confirm that motion. They were too focused on getting to their landmarks, which is honestly way less important, especially having a deep safety in the low red zone. And that small adjustment, not the call, but the adjustment, was what cost them the Super Bowl. 2 touchdowns coming from one concept and one lack of adjustment is what decided the game, and shows the NFL is truly about the marginalist of margins. The Eagles' defense was a historic unit with one of the absolute best pass rushes of all time, but the Chiefs found the one chink in their armor. Pouring through months and months and hours of their film, Andy Reid found the one aspect of their defense that they didn't account for and didn't fix. A split second where one corner turns his back can be all the difference in winning it all and bitter defeat, and the difference between a coach who can identify those nuances compared with one who can't is a Super Bowl trophy. Andy Reid is one of the best we've ever seen do it, and his ability to find that one adjustment the defense hasn't made each and every week is what sets him apart. He is a champion. Patrick Mahomes is legendary. The Chiefs are on top of the world, and as a collective, they are immortality.